Hello and welcome to Kick-Ass Brand Show. I'm Andrei, Mincov, the founder of Trademark Factory. And today I bring you Steve Olsher, known as the world's foremost reinvention expert. Famous for helping individuals and corporations become exceptionally clear on their what. That is, the one thing they were created to do. His practical, no-holds-barred approach to life and business propels his clients towards achieving massive profitability while also cultivating a life of purpose, conviction, and contribution. Steve is a New York Times bestselling author of What is Your What? Discover the one amazing thing you were born to do, creator of the New Media Summit, host of #1 rated radio shows and podcasts, Reinvention Radio and Beyond 8 Figures. And I'm just scratching the surface of all the businesses he's been involved in and all the amazing things he's accomplished. Steve dropped some amazing wisdom bombs during the interview on what separates successful entrepreneurs from those who aren't, and also gave some great tips relating to developing a kick-ass brand. Ready? Steady? Go! Welcome, Steve. Really happy to have you on the show today. And we'll talk about how you got to do what you do, why you do it, and what you're getting out of it. But what I'd love to start with is probably ask you how you got to do what you do, because what you do is a very specific niche, and you're known as the expert in podcasting today. So let's start there.
Man, it's something I've been doing now for a lot of years. I've actually been podcasting since 2009 is when we did our first episode of Reinvention Radio. So that combined with just really diving into the medium pretty heavily, and 2015 I'd say is when I started taking it a lot more seriously. Mm-hmm. It's become quite clear to me that for coaches and authors and speakers, small business owners, and holistic practitioners, et cetera. I mean, there's really no better way to generate highly targeted leads. Have, of course, conversations with those leads, and then if you do things the way that they can be done, then those conversations can turn into revenue. So, from my perspective, there's a lot of noise out there about what works and what doesn't work. And of course, some would say that podcasting is just more noise. But from my experience, it's pretty tough to beat.
Well, I met you at several events, saw you speak, and this is really how this relationship was born. And the second time you spoke, I had this big light bulb again, shining in my head, thinking of all the podcast opportunities where I was a guest that I didn't properly utilize, and what you shared at I think it was Lisa Stasevic's event.
Could have been.
Completely changed the way I look at it, and now I understand why some people don't treat podcasts seriously, because they don't know what to do with that after they are invited as a guest on the podcast. They go there, they're so excited, they talk about some things, and then nothing happens. And then they say the podcasts don't work, right? So if you could kind of give a little bit of an overview of why that approach is wrong, and that there are actually ways to successfully utilize podcasts to create those leads, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I will be the first to say that, I've made plenty of those mistakes myself in terms of just looking at visibility from the standpoint of, let me just go ahead and share my message and just bank on the fact that visibility is going to create leads and visibility is going to create revenue. But the bottom line really is that you just it didn't work for me in that way. It's not going to work for you in that way. You have to be proactive. I mean, the bottom line is you really have to bounce people from whatever that that platform is, whether it's podcasting or blogging or social media or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. But you have to bounce people into your ecosystem, right? You have to get them to go from being a passive listener or a passive viewer into being an active prospect, which means you have to know who they are, right? And in most cases, you really don't know who the people are that are listening to podcasts, right? I mean, just you do it through an anonymous, it's an anonymous medium. I mean, you listen through your headphones, listen through your earbuds, but we as podcasters, we don't necessarily know who those listeners are because we don't get a list of them, right? So how do you have a relationship with someone that you don't know who they are? And that's really what the sort of light bulb moment, if you're using that terminology, that's really what that light bulb moment was for me, which is we've got to have an offline conversation in terms of offline from that particular medium in order for there to be any sort of lead generation, revenue generating type activity associated with that appearance.
Right. And just to be clear, I thought that it's enough to take them offline is just to say, well, look, here's my website, go book a call with me or send me an email or call me. And that does generate some activity, but it's minuscule compared to all the success stories that you were telling that were based on not just telling people where to go, but what they're going to get there, right? So if that was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you just have to make it really. It has to be really compelling for someone to want to connect with you in that offline way, right? Because when you hear somebody on a podcast, and we're just going to focus on that medium for now.
Yeah.
So when you hear someone on a podcast, if you are then inviting them to somehow get into touch with you, whether it's through a strategy session, and strategy sessions can be really effective, they can work really, really well. Or if it's through opting in, providing their name and email address for a particular lead magnet, whatever that lead magnet might be, they have to make a second move, which means they have to literally go from being on just the podcast distribution channel, whatever that is for them, Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, Overcast, etc., to then either opening up their browser to go grab that lead magnet or calling you if you provide a phone number, right? So there's an additional step. So it just has to be really compelling, right, is the bottom line.
Yeah, and the way I saw it is, all of these, experts who say how important it is to have a lead magnet and capture all of that stuff. You need to drive traffic to it. But what connected in my mind was podcast. When you're a guest on somebody else's podcast, that is probably the number one reason to have a sexy lead magnet that people want to go and get. As you say, right? It takes them extra effort to go open their browser, click on the link, put their name and email in the form. So that's probably the number one reason you want to have something to give to people that they would want to go and grab based on your interview.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it just has to be a really brain dead simple yes. Let me go ahead and get that, which means it just has to add a lot of value. I mean, like one of the things that we do is if I'm on a show, this show, right, where we're talking about podcasting. Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent, of course, of having your own shows, but I'm also a huge proponent of appearing on other people's shows as a guest, because honestly, being a guest on other people's shows is a heck of a lot easier than having your own show. I mean, this, there's a lot less work involved when you just show up and talk about something versus, having your own show and all the work that goes hand in hand with that. So I'm a big proponent of having people show up, on other podcasts as a guest, right? So, and of course, it can be equally powerful in terms of monetizing your visibility. So the point being that if I'm talking about the power of being a guest on other people's shows and why it's something you should think about doing, and I then turn around and I say, one of the biggest obstacles that I find for most folks in terms of getting booked on podcasts is not only, of course, knowing what the top shows are, but who the hosts and the producers are of those shows, and then getting the contact details for the people who make the decision about saying yes or no to guests. So what we did is we put together the ultimate directory of podcasters, which contains detailed contact information, including 670 leading podcasts and their hosts and their producers and their email address and everything else, right? So if I've done my job and I've really made the case for why you should be a guest on a show, and then I turn around and I say, go on and grab this ultimate directory of podcasters, then it's an easy yes, because, well, there's 670 podcasters featured.
Yep.
It's not like we're just going to say, hey, here's a list of 10 or something of that nature. We give them a lot for their name and email. And so the cost of providing the name and email is ostensibly less than the price, if you will, of ending up on another email list, right? So just got to make sure that whatever you put forth, just has a ton of value for them.
So look, I got the list the first time we met, and the way you positioned it now made me want to go and download it again because it's so compelling. It's a no-brainer, as you say. It's exactly how you want to position it, and that's what makes people tick, right?
Yeah.
Create a compelling story, and then you give them a compelling way to take it to the next level.
Absolutely.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So, well, while we're on it, how do people get that ultimate directory of podcasts?
Sure.
Because look, it's not just to promote you, which I'm happy to do, but it's also something that I believe everyone who's listening to the show who wants to build a great brand, promote their great brand, they got to be on the podcast, and much easier to do it when you have a list in front of you than having yourself do it or even your VA do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it would obviously it cost us a small fortune to do all the research and assemble all of this in an easy to consume manner, right? So absolutely. I mean, if you hired someone to go out and try to find detailed contact information for 670 top shows, you'd probably spend a couple $1,000s trying to do that, right? So anyway, it's more though than just simply knowing who these people are, right? I mean, the bottom line for me is that I know that, as I said before, and part of why I'm so fired up about this medium is that I just know that there are too many coaches and authors and speakers and business owners and holistic practitioners, et cetera, who are just wasting so much time, energy, and resources on marketing type activities that just don't provide a reasonable ROI. And so generating the leads and generating the conversations and the revenue and the visibility through podcasting as a guest doesn't cost you anything. I mean, there's literally no cost to it. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I encourage people to really pursue this medium. So look, bottom line is, you can grab the directory. It's called the Ultimate Directory of Podcasters. It's updated for 2019. So it's our fully updated edition. And that is at myultimatedirectory.com. So myultimatedirectory.com.
Okay, we're going to post a link, as my editor is going to do that, and
Good.
You'll be able to see that and go get that. And so once they download it, obviously they end up on your list, and I'm subscribed. You post some great content there, and one of the things you do is you also teach people how to properly approach those contacts so that they don't ban you right away and actually have a conversation with you. And you do so many more things to educate entrepreneurs how to take advantage of the medium and we spend brands out there.
I think I spend 5 pages telling you not to email anybody in the directory. So whether or not you choose to follow the advice, I mean, at some point it makes sense, of course, to email them, but I spend 5 pages talking about, why out of the gate is not exactly the right move, right? For most folks to just get their email and just start spamming them, because it'll just, it'll get deleted faster than you can, what's going to happen there if you just start randomly spamming people. So, yeah,
absolutely. So make sure you go get that. And so the other question I have for you, so you've obviously helped, I don't even know how many entrepreneurs and brands go out there and raise their visibility level. Got to be in the thousands, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. So, since we're a kick-ass brand show, one of the questions I always ask is, what do you think makes a brand a kick-ass brand?
It's a good question. It's got nothing to do necessarily with the logo or how something looks. I mean, that's all well and good, but I've seen some, pretty big companies that have, some pretty bad logos, right? So, reality is, to me, it's a long game. It's a long tail game that makes a really kick-ass brand. I mean, it's something that doesn't, just kind of, it's not like a fly-by-night type endeavor, flash in the pan, it's here and then it's gone. It's really a long tail game, something that stands the test of time, so that when somebody says the name, it evokes positive emotion, right? And that to me is ultimately what's going to make for the best brand, is something where over time you really don't need to do much in terms of marketing or positioning, because you've done all of that work all of those years. So that's the epitome of a really kick-ass brand. It's just something that evokes positive emotion without you really having to do anything much more than just say the name.
This is so good and so in line really with what I've been saying, that it's not about coming up with a great brand. It's about coming up with a unique brand and waiting for it to become great over time, right? You said those exact words, over time. And that's really the only way to do it, because I mean, you can come up with the cutest name out there.
Yeah.
It's in the early stages not going to do much for you.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a new real estate / tech venture, which has actually a pretty damn good brand logo and name and all that fun stuff. But reality is, we're trying to create an all new category of real estate, if you will. It's not renting and it's not traditional home ownership. It's what I call nomadic flexible housing. You build equity, you have privacy, you have flexibility to move from location to location. It's a primary residence situation. But the bottom line is, we want the word latitude to be associated with sort of being the Band-Aid, if you will, of nomadic flexible housing, right? So over time, we're kind of thinking and hoping it'll become more of a verb, right? So the brand itself becomes the action. Have you considered, latitude living or something of that nature, right? For people who want to have more flexibility and to be able to move from location to location, but still build equities if they're a homeowner without the headaches of home ownership. And yes, we've got a great looking brand and logo and this, that, and the other, but it's really going to take a lot of marketing and a lot of time and a lot of energy and resources and effort in order for it to be ubiquitous with this third type of housing that doesn't currently exist, that we're looking to create the category on, right? So it's just it's an interesting exercise in the power of branding.
Yeah. Well, look, as a trademark guy, right? It's something I've spent my entire career doing.
Yeah.
I have to warn you against, what you just said, because, be careful, because what you wish for, because it might just come true. The last thing you want with your brand is to become a verb. This is something that Google has been struggling with. They were taken to Supreme Court recently because people are saying, look, it's not a brand anymore. It's just a generic term for online search. And the only way Google was able to win, barely, is they said, we don't only do search, we do a lot of other things. And that name is not ubiquitous with those other things, so let us keep our brand. But I think really, if they continue doing what they do the way they do it, it's just a matter of time before Google becomes Thermos or Escalator or all of those, like Linoleum. They were all brands at some point until they became really the thing.
So I will have to rethink that.
You want to rethink that, because you want everyone to know you. You want everyone to think of you, but you want to think of, them of the type of service, but offered by you.
Yeah.
So this is
point well taken. Thank you for that.
You could be, nomadic by latitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of brand you certainly do want to, own
Yeah.
and protect, because, one of the things we always say is there's no reason in the world to spend $1 out of your pocket or a minute out of your life building a brand you don't own.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Thank you for that.
But
Yep.
that was an interesting point you brought up, right? So hope it was useful for both the audience and yourself. So when somebody comes to you for consulting so that you help them get better, I know you've got your events when you train entrepreneurs to share their message out there. Have you noticed anything that you would like to comment on in terms of how they try to be visible with their brands, how they promote their brands, how they position their brands, some advice that has something to do with branding and building a successful brand?
Yeah, and it is interesting because the event that you're referring to is called the New Media Summit. And at the New Media Summit, we teach our attendees how to really leverage and monetize the power of new media. But the real kicker there is we bring in 40 top podcasters, and we give all of the attendees the opportunity to take center stage and pitch them on who they are and what they do, and they literally get booked on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about the event is we have an opportunity to hear from all of these different entrepreneurs about who they are and what it is they do and the unique value that they bring to the table. So we've done 4 of them now, and we'll do our 5th one in September.
Mm-hmm.
So at each event, we have 150 attendees that take the stage to do this. So the bottom line is we've had 600 people take the stage to pitch the podcasters on who they are and what they do, right? And I will say that after hearing 600 pitches, it becomes really clear to me that most people have a very difficult time articulating who they are and what they do and the unique value that they bring to the table. And of course, branding themselves in a way where they don't get confused with a million other people who do similar things. And so it's a struggle. It truly is a struggle. And so to that end, like for instance, if you think about personal development and self-help,
Mm-hmm.
this conversation has been around for God knows how long, right? In terms of improving oneself and so on. So when I set out to write my own book on the subject, I knew I wasn't going to be able to compete with the Tony Robbins or be able to compete with an Eckhart Tolle or these sort of people. I mean, obviously I have my own unique perspectives on things, but just trying to tackle those 800-pound gorillas, that's pretty hard to do. So what I had to do was I had to create my own unique framework. I had to create my own unique process, my own unique system, which is in this world of personal health and self-development, personal development and self-help, it's called what is your what, right? So it's the what is your what framework, which helps people identify their core vehicle, their core gift. In other words, really what's in their DNA, how they're naturally wired to excel. The primary vehicle that they will use to share that gift, and then the people that they're most compelled to serve. And of course, there are exercises that take people through the process of discovering and answering each, right? So, but it's the combination of the gift, the vehicle, and the people that make up the what is your what framework, which is the unique brand, right? It's unique to who I am and what I do. And it helps people really discover that one amazing thing they were born to do. And then because of my background in business, I can teach them how to share and monetize it. So it's a very interesting discussion around how do you create a unique brand and how do you differentiate who you are from a million other people who do something very similar. And it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Would it be fair to say that what differentiates those who are successful at picking up those interviewers versus those who aren't is the degree of clarity that they have in terms of what they are, what they do, what their message is, and why the message is more compelling than any other alternative?
Yeah, and look, clarity is a double-edged sword, right? I mean, there's obviously clarity in terms of positioning what you do,
Hmm.
but the bigger piece of clarity really is understanding and being able to articulate the benefits that someone would realize from working with you, right?
Right.
Like if we go back to the case of Latitude, then what are the benefits of being a Latitude member? Right? What am I delivering that makes it unique
Mm.
from traditional home ownership versus just renting versus Airbnb or any of those other sort of options, right? And so it's a challenging exercise of really being able to gain clarity on why someone should say yes to you. And what that means is if they say yes to you, they're really saying no to others.
Yeah.
So how do you make it so compelling that they say no to everyone else?
I love the concept that I learned from Joel Roberts. He says there are only two types of problems in the world. There are problems that people have and problems that people don't have. And your job as an entrepreneur is to either show them that you solve a problem that they have or that they have a problem that you solve.
Yeah.
And it's infinitely easier to build your business if you all you need to do is just show them that you solve a problem that they have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's exactly why. And again, I don't mean to beat the horse on this, but when we're talking about Latitude, our primary market, our primary avatar is the person who self-identifies as a digital nomad, right? The
right.
person who has the flexibility to work from anywhere and live anywhere that they want. And they're tied to that gig economy, if you will, where all they really need is a laptop and a suitcase, and they can make their living from nearly anywhere on the planet. So, it's not going to be the people with kids that want to keep, their children in a public school on a consistent basis. It's not going to be the people that have to go into an office on an everyday basis, right? It's not going to be those people. And honestly, and just kind of furthering the point here, when we think about marketing, there's really only two types of marketing, right? I mean, there's marketing that attracts and marketing that repels.
Yeah.
And part of your job as a marketer is to not only attract but also to repel
And you want to be very clear who you're not for.
who you're not for. Sure.
Yeah. And it's part of everything. It's part of branding, part of marketing, part of your sales process, part of really your growth as an entrepreneur, the way I see it, because pretty much everyone starts with the idea, well, I can help everybody. You can breathe, I can help you.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then really the difference between those who are successful versus those who are not is the time that it takes them to realize that it doesn't work that way.
Well, yeah, but of course, I mean, you've got a lot of trial and error, and even beating this horse here, but even with Latitude, I mean, we first started out thinking that in phase one we were going to have three levels of membership.
Hmm.
So three different price points, three different types of real estate that we would have to acquire, because in our case, Latitude, all of the real estate is company owned. So what we realized though is in phase one, it just makes the most sense to have one level of membership, period,
Hmm.
with one consistent type of housing. And so, had we gone down the path of having those three levels of membership, it would have been a pretty convoluted process here, right, to get out of the gate. So, by getting started and then by having conversations and by really putting those wheels in motion, it then became very clear that probably in phase one, the best thing to do here is really just focus on that one level of membership. But we wouldn't have been able to come to that conclusion unless we had started down the path, right? So it's just an interesting exercise in being transparent and seeking outside counsel, and sitting down with people who are your ideal clientele.
Cool. This is awesome. So if you were to think of one thing that you would have done differently, because as you say, we all make mistakes, it's all trial and error. You wish that things you realize 5 years into the business, you realize day one, but it never happens. What is the one thing you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty sad and scary answer, all in the same. But reality is I look back on the last 10 years, really, that I've dedicated pretty much the last decade to trying to build this personal brand, this Steve Olsher personal brand, if you will. And I stopped doing real estate development in order to do this work.
Hmm.
What I came to the conclusion of, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, not too long ago at this point, is that what I'm building, it might be scalable, it might be somewhat sustainable, but it's not saleable because so much of what I'm doing here revolves around me as the personal brand. So I've had to really take a step back and rethink, what is the best MO moving forward here for what I've created. And the reality is I've got to keep working at it. I've got to keep speaking on stages. I've got to keep doing product launches. I have to keep doing all of these activities
Right.
in order to continually generate revenue in this personal brand arena. And so, the God's honest truth is I think that the biggest mistake that I've made is giving up doing real estate development in order to build this personal brand.
Mm.
It's a hamster wheel that's really difficult to get off of.
Have you read the book Built to Sell by John Warrilow?
Seen it, haven't read it.
Great book. This is
Yeah.
really something that somebody brought and said, Andre, you must read it. And
Yeah.
this is what caused Trademark Factory to become basically what it is now. Exactly the problem you're describing, right? You build a business, usually service based, usually based on the person who's the face of the company,
Yeah.
which is scalable but not sellable because once the person is gone, there's no business. So,
Yes.
and it's like really easy read.
I'm going to pick that one up. Yeah. Thanks for the tip.
I endorse it highly.
Good.
So cool. If so, two more things that I want to get from you today. What's the number one tip that you would give to those who are about to start a new business?
Get really, really clear on what your biggest opportunity is. One of the things that I teach my clients quite consistently is to stop stepping over dollars to get to dimes. And reality is, as I look back on these last 10 years, I'm going to sit here and say that if I was coaching myself, I would have told myself that you're stepping over dollars to get to dimes.
Mm.
And so it's funny, I met with Smiljan More, who's one of Europe's top personal development. He's got an incredible following, and I think he's from Croatia.
Mhm.
Just a huge following. He came in for a half-day VIP day. His social media following is, 1,000x of what mine is, right? There's no comparison. And part of what we spent a good chunk of time talking about was really how to identify that biggest opportunity and ultimately how to leverage the following that he has
Mm.
created against being able to get back to the dollars as opposed to chasing the dimes.
Right.
And it really impacted him on a deep level, so much so that he has changed his whole business model to reflect what we discussed over the course of just those few hours together. So that's certainly number one is just really being clear on what your biggest opportunity is and be sufficiently honest about whether you're stepping over dollars to get to dimes.
That's a great way to position this. Love it. Before we go, is there a question that you wish I had asked, but I didn't? Do you want to answer a question that I never asked you?
Right. Look, man, no question in particular, but I will simply say this, which is, there's no better way to grow as a human being and to grow your business faster than to learn from those who have already been where you want to go or made the mistakes or have accomplished what it is that you want to accomplish, right? So, by listening to this show, and if maybe one of our shows like Reinvention Radio or Beyond Eight Figures can help shortcut that process for you. just encourage you to keep learning. I consider myself to be a perpetual student, and just have never resigned myself to the fact that I've learned everything that I need to learn. So, just be willing to continually be a student, and good things will happen.
That's great parting words. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. And again, what's the link for people to go get the Ultimate Directory and get on your list and start getting more wisdom from you?
Yeah. So myultimatedirectory.com. So myultimatedirectory.com. Myultimatedirectory.com. Yep.
Okay, go get it. All right. Thanks again. And I'll see you in the next episode. Steve and I would love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this story? Is there anything you learned today that you're going to implement in your business? Post a comment below and also share this interview with your friends. And make sure to download the Ultimate Podcast Directory that Steve created. I have it. I use it. It's awesome. And don't forget to subscribe to be the first to receive updates about new episodes. And by the way, if you think you deserve to be on the show because you have a kick-ass brand and you have a great story around it, email me at next@kickassbrandshow.com. It's next@kickassbrandshow.com. And until then, I'll see you in the next episode.